Perfect. Good. All right. Well, welcome everybody. Thank you for joining Yoji and I today. We are going to present on diversity and inclusion and hopefully engage in some discussion with all of you regarding the importance of diversity and inclusion and the role that they play within FIRST and a few other things. My name is Megan Turok. I work at Medtronic and I work in our corporate library, our information center. And as I said, co-presenting with me today is Yoji Shimizu, who is the Diversity and Inclusion Chair for FIRST in the Upper Midwest. So we're going to share a little bit more, like I said, about the importance of inclusion and diversity within our own experiences. I think there are a number of similarities, even just from the last presentation that I heard with the implicit bias training, being intentional about talking about your core values. There's a number of parallels between a company like Medtronic and FIRST. And so I'm excited to explore those a little bit. We'll talk about why they're important for FIRST and then have some discussion around considerations and how to increase diversity and inclusion within your teams. All right, so I'm going to kick it off here and talk a little bit about Medtronic and about diversity and inclusion at our company. In my role, my day-to-day, I work directly with our scientists and our engineers. We have about 10 to 15,000 scientists and engineers, technical people, and it's my team in particular. We provide a lot of opportunities for them to connect and share what they know and better collaborate. I'm also the chair for communications within our Medtronic Women's Network. It's one of our diversity networks that we have at the company, and we have diversity networks to help strengthen ties between employees with many different backgrounds and interests, and to introduce other people too to these diverse cultures and perspectives. So you can probably already hear it, but diversity and inclusion is very much a passion of mine, and I'm so grateful to be part of a company that recognizes the value that comes from ensuring that we have that culture that perpetuates inclusion and equity. Some of my favorite moments in my career have been around diversity events or large group events. My team, we put on an annual conference. It's called the Science and Technology Conference, and it brings thousands of our engineers and our scientists here to Minneapolis, and usually in person, and they come together. And I am a librarian. I'm not a scientist. I'm not an engineer. I'm not a technical person, but I get to be in a room with these technical people that have so many different experiences and skills and perspectives because we have sites in about 170 countries. And so the innovation that happens at our company because of those diverse perspectives is pretty incredible. So it's one of my favorite events every year. A little bit about Medtronic and about diversity and inclusion and how it's rooted in our mission. And if you don't know a lot about Medtronic, just at a very high level, we are one of the largest medical device companies in the world. Like I said, we operate within about 170 countries. We treat 70 different overall health conditions all over the body. And we have about 90,000 employees who all work together collectively. Kind of our tagline is we help alleviate pain for our patients, we help restore their health, and we help extend their lives. As I kind of mentioned, innovation is really important for a company like Medtronic, and it's our focus on diversity and inclusion that helps us stay fairly innovative. Earl Bakken, he is our founder, and he wrote our mission. In the last presentation, I loved that the students were talking about being intentional about every meeting, talking about their core values so that you can reiterate that and show that that's part of who we are and what we stand for. We do the same thing at Medtronic. Every presentation, you're going to hear about the mission, you're going to see this medallion, and that's important. And it's important because Earl Bakken, he wrote a mission that has 6 tenets. The 5th tenet is linked to inclusion and diversity, and it says that we are going to recognize the personal wealth of all employees by providing an employee framework that allows personal satisfaction in work, in security and advancement. And so it's all about making sure that all employees feel like they're included, that they have a voice, and that their perspectives are heard. One of my, Earl in around 1960, he wrote a number of different goals for the company. And throughout his tenure at the company, he would go back and say, how are we doing, and provide status updates. And one of the goals, I'm a little biased being part of the Medtronic Women's Network, but that he talked about, I dreamed of a world where women would lead. And that's been really a big focus for our company, especially in the last 5 years. And we're working towards 50% women leadership. So it's still in progress, but it's amazing that we get to focus on that. So at Medtronic, we have this culture of inclusion. And with that, that allows us to, one, create a culture that fosters, so we have an inclusive, so we believe that it's only with a truly inclusive workplace that the benefits of diversity can be realized. And so with that, we'll go to our next slide and talk a little bit about how we are executing on inclusion and diversity and what we've learned. And here's where I think there are some parallels between us and FIRST. So at Medtronic, and part of that inclusive culture, employees can truly be their best selves at work without fear, without anxiety. We're embracing individuality, and through that, we encourage them to build and grow in their career. We allow employees to be their authentic selves, building deeper relationships among them and their teams. We create an enriching work experience for all employees. So through the diversity of our employees, we get exposure to a broad range of talents and skills and experiences, and every employee can benefit from that. And through that, we have more engaged teams. So more engaged teams translate into better work culture, and that makes it easier for us to recruit new team members and to keep them coming back. Most importantly, with diverse viewpoints, we have better decision-making, we have more meaningful innovation, we have more diverse perspectives, and it gives us fresh insights, and it allows us to design creatively and to come up with creative solutions. And we found that it's been proven that companies with diverse and inclusive workplaces out-innovate and outperform their competitors. So the business case is very clear. Companies like ours with more diversity perform better. Diverse and inclusive teams create not just more ideas, but more unlikely ideas. And so when we have different ideas or different viewpoints, and we start to come together and share those and build off of those, we can come to conclusions that likely no one ever thought was even possible. And it's about individuals. When diverse perspectives are sought out, individuals will feel more included, more valued, as they're going to bring something to the team that nobody else can. All right, so I know Yoji and I both want this session to be interactive, and so I do have an exercise that I want us to do. This is something I do a lot with our scientists and our engineers, and start to think about and show why diversity and inclusion is so important, and what can come from it. So what I want us to do is, we have a brick here, and I want us to think about how can a brick be used other than what we know we typically use a brick for, like in building. So I want everybody to take 1 minute, maybe jot down in your mind or jot down on a piece of paper 3 to 5 different ways that you can use a brick other than for building. I'm going to give you a minute to do that. And then I'm actually going to put you in breakout rooms with 2 to 3 other people, 3 to 4 other people. You all are going to share the ideas that you have. And then we're going to come back as a group and do a little bit of a report out and see all the amazing and innovative ideas that you have in using a brick. All right, so with that, I'm going to give you 1 minute. I'm going to put a timer on my phone, let you guys take that minute to write down a few ideas, and then we'll put you in breakouts. About 30 more seconds, less than that. Hopefully you're thinking of a lot of really good ideas. All right, so now we are going to put you in some breakout rooms real quick. We're going to give you about 5 minutes, 4 to 5 minutes to share your ideas. And then as a group, we'll come back and we'll share those with everybody else. And so Kristen on my team, she is my co-moderator today. She is going to put everybody in those breakouts. And Kristen, you can go ahead and do that. And there they go. Have fun. Yoji, I didn't put you in a room. I hope that's okay. I thought
that's fine. Don't worry.
Maybe. Sometimes people feel intimidated when presenters are in there, so I thought.
Yeah, I know. I think it's a good idea.
And thank you, Kristen, for helping with that. I know I just told Kristen about it about 5 minutes ago, so.
No problem.
Stepped up.
It wasn't my first time, so
that's true.
I felt good about it.
Good. And maybe Kristen at 10:49, we could just do a prompt to them to say 1 minute left, and then we can bring them back.
When I click close all rooms, it automatically gives them like a 60-second countdown.
Mm-hmm.
Do you want me to do it before that, you're saying?
So maybe do it in like a minute, say maybe 2 more minutes, and then do the close all rooms, because some people come back right away from it when they see that prompt, right. And some people, wait.
Totally.
Cool, thank you. Also, Yoji, I love the dot exercise that you. Yeah. I'm taking that. Like, that's amazing. I love
that site. I use it a lot. I'm actually going to use it this morning too. So
I love it.
It's a free site and it really works great. So.
That's what I'm trying to gather. I do a lot of different sessions of these kinds of things, and I'm trying to find different platforms that offer those kinds of things just to change it up a little bit.
Yeah,
it's great. All right, Kristen, if you want to close the rooms, that would be great.
All right, they have 55 seconds.
Perfect, thank you.
Mm-hmm.
I always like it when they don't come back right away, because then I know that they're talking, that they're engaging, not just waiting to come back.
Not just all sitting there staring at each other.
Right, right. All right, got some people coming back. Good. I hope that exercise went well. I hope you liked that. I was kind of joking with Kristen and Yoji that nobody came back right away. So hopefully that meant there was some good ideation happening. Good. So I think that, I just kind of want to open it up and hear from maybe 2 or 3 people, maybe start to just share a few ideas that they had. This is my favorite part because I have some that I'm going to show you, but I just love hearing the variety that people come up with. Hello, welcome back. So let's have 2 to 3 people unmute themselves and share a few ideas their teams came up with.
I got one.
All right, go ahead, Caleb.
I think that the holes in the brick can be used to store stuff like candles. Hold 3
Absolutely.
candles.
I love it. Decorative. I love it.
So our group came up with about 8 different things. And some of them were physical, the physical world, where we could use it as a stepladder, as a oven, to have weight in the battery cart. But there was also the metaphor for using it to shatter any of the boundaries that are holding us back from becoming our best selves.
Lori, that I feel like if there was going to be a winner, if this was a competition, that's it for me. That's amazing. I love that. Amazing. Maybe one more person. Similar to that, Lori, I always get somebody who says, you can throw it. You can throw it at things. You know, there's, you know, so it's always fun to see who's gonna jump in and say that one.
Along the lines of smashing, it could be a can opener.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Thank you, Rachel. Good. So I hope that shows you just a small, simple exercise to get us thinking about the diversity of thought and the impact that can have. These are some things that I found. And so, and this is a good one. It was mentioned here too, is one idea, using it for plants or using it for candles in that decorative way. Again, I've mentioned I'm a librarian. So to me, this just won my heart over when I saw these old bricks used, and they painted book images on them, and they can be used for a garden. They could be used as a bookend. And then this one, although it is used for building, I still thought it was pretty unique design for a mailbox. And so a few others, but again, how this also can be relevant for you and your first team is to emphasize that we all don't think the same, and that's a good thing. And with new and fresh perspectives, students are going to ask the questions that need context and that we might take for granted as we get so heads down in this work. They're going to ask for that additional information that will be refreshers for us and hopefully get us to think even more innovatively. So with that, I am going to hand it over to Yoji and talk a little bit more about diversity and inclusion when it comes to FIRST.
Okay, thank you, Megan, and really appreciate it. Thanks everybody for being here this morning. I am going to spend my time basically providing you with some data and some resources. And I think the message that maybe I'm going to convey to you is that as a community, a FIRST community, we have opportunities to be more innovative and be more creative and be more successful if we can work intentionally on increasing the diversity of our community. So let me start with my slides, and we're going to do something interactive as well. I want to first maybe just define kind of what we talk about, what we mean when we talk about diversity, equity, and inclusion. So think about your robot, your team's robot, and who's working on the robot, right? When we talk about diversity, we're talking about who's working on the robot, the representation of all our different identities and differences collectively and as individuals. How diverse is that group? And then when we talk about equity, we're really talking about is the process by which you work on the robot and make those decisions fair and equal. Do you provide opportunity and access to everyone who's working on the robot? And then when we talk about inclusion, we're really talking about what's the space that you're working on the robot like? Is it a culture? Is it a community that really focuses on inviting and including everyone and actively creating a community of belonging? So that's really what we're talking about when we talk about diversity, equity, and inclusion. I'm probably going to spend a lot of time this morning really talking about diversity, but clearly focusing just on diversity is not enough, that we really also need to kind of focus also on equity and inclusion. So my interactive exercise is really going to focus on this question about how diverse is our universe? And I'm going to ask you to go to this site and what I will share with you, I'll do this by chat as well, and get the site on chat. It should look like this. So you should be able to enter your name in the upper right. And once you do that, you will have 10 virtual dots. And for the sake of this diversity exercise, we're going to focus on racial and ethnic diversity. Right, so you have cards here for white, Asian, Black or African American, Hispanic, Latino, Native Hawaiian, Pacific Islander, Native American, Alaska Native, and more than one race. And I'm going to give you 10 prompts. And with each prompt, I'm going to ask you to put a virtual dot next to the appropriate label or the appropriate race or ethnicity. Okay? Does that make sense? Everybody's kind of logged in. All right, so here are the prompts. And this is all kind of private voting. So at the end, we'll kind of share the overall results. Okay, oops, sorry. Didn't do that right. Here. Okay, here we go. So here are the prompts. So first one is your race or ethnicity. So please put a dot next to the appropriate card. Okay, that's the first one. The second one is, my neighbors at home are predominantly, whatever that card is, right? The next one is, people in my social circle are predominantly. Next is, my teachers or work colleagues are predominantly. Okay, that's number 5. Number 5 is, my robotics mentors are predominantly. So if you're a mentor, think about the other mentors that you work with. If you're a student on a team, think about your mentors that are on your team, right? Okay, number 6 is, in the last good movie I saw, the people were predominantly. All right, next is, during the course of a day, the people with whom I come into contact with are predominantly. Okay, next is, the person outside of my family whom I most admire, or who has had the greatest impact on my life is. All right, 2 more. The race or ethnicity of your favorite celebrity or sports figure. And last is the author of the last book I read. Okay, so let's let me show you what this looks like. So where is that? Here. Okay, so this is what we come up with, right? So you know, our universe in terms of diversity is fairly white, and followed up by more than one race: Asian, Hispanic, Black, or African American, and no Native Americans, no Native Hawaiian or Pacific Islanders, right? That's probably not maybe terribly surprising to all of us, but I think this is a nice kind of vivid illustration of how relatively non-diverse I think our worlds can be. So let me kind of tell you about sort of what we know about the demographics of the first community in the state of Minnesota. So first is the overall demographic trends in our state, or like in every other state, it's getting more diverse. I think we are ranked currently at number 8 or number 9 in terms of the pace with which our state is diversifying, although we're not currently a very diverse state. But in terms of the diversification that's happening over time, it's increasing. And as you can see, this is really true for our younger members of our state. They are much more diverse than older residents in the state of Minnesota. We have data from FIRST about the demographics of both our students and our mentors for FIRST robotics competition. And so this is a graph that basically compares the race and ethnicity here for students who participated in FRC in 2020 in the state of Minnesota.
Hey, Yoji, just you're showing the dot screen. I don't know if you're meaning to show your
I'm
slide.
sorry.
No, that's okay.
Oh, sorry. Here we go. Let's see here. Okay. You see it now?
Perfect. Yep.
Okay, I'm sorry.
No,
Yeah.
no, it's great.
So again, this is the state demographic trends that are shown here. What we're using as kind of a baseline for comparison is data from the state of Minnesota Department of Education for 11th grade students in the state. So you can see here that actually when it comes to white and Asian students, we're fairly representative of the state of Minnesota with regard to 11th graders, but underrepresented with regard to Hispanics and African Americans. So this is a little confusing because FRC reports more than one race, and the state of Minnesota actually does not report more than one race. So this could be an underrepresentation, I think, in that area for race and ethnicity. Now, gender, you know, this is an issue in engineering in particular, and it's not maybe surprising that the FRC has a similar kind of gender imbalance in the sense that only 27% of the students who participated in FRC in 2020 are female or identify as female. 72% are male, and that skewing is also true in the engineering workforce as well, right? So although I will say that, you know, with the data that we get from FIRST, we can break this down by county. And there are counties within the state where this is not the case, that we see much more equivalent participation between girls and boys in FRC. Now, finally, in terms of mentor demographics, this is also true that there is a skewing towards the participation of male mentors in FRC in Minnesota compared to female mentors. And then when we look at race and ethnicity, there's more underrepresentation within the mentor pool. So, and this is true for both Asians, Hispanics, African Americans when compared to the Minnesota FRC students. So, so that's true as well, right? So I view these as kind of opportunities to kind of really think carefully about what are we missing and what are we losing when we have a relatively non-diverse participation. So questions to really just think about is why is this actually important? I think Megan kind of talked about this before, and I think it's important to kind of reinforce these kinds of questions. One, it may be important to you and your team. So that's important to kind of just keep in mind. It's very, very important to FIRST, and I'll talk about that in a couple of slides. And as Megan has talked to you about, it's important to sponsors. So it's important to Medtronic, it's important to other sponsors. We are seeing that many sponsors are increasing their expectations when they support FRC teams with regard to this commitment to diversity, equity, and inclusion. As Megan mentioned, diversity is an asset for your team. The exercise you kind of went through with the brick, you know, it's evident that the more complex the task, the bigger the bonus is when you have diverse perspectives that participate in team decisions and team function. Teams beat individuals, and diverse teams beat homogeneous teams. And although I focused this morning on kind of race and ethnicity, it's both diversity in who we are, but also diversity in how we think. And all of those things are important. And then finally, your team really can't benefit from diversity without this emphasis on equity and inclusion as well. So let me give you a couple of examples of where the lack of diversity has real world consequences on people and on our community, right? So one is seatbelts. So seatbelts were designed by men and they were tested on men. So it turns out that seatbelt design, currently the seatbelts in cars are really not as safe for women as they are for men because of this testing design process that was developed. So that's one example. Artificial intelligence is turning out to be an area where there is a lot of concern about bias. Google has a computer vision system that basically has labeled African Americans as gorillas. Microsoft's vision system was reported to fail to recognize darker skinned people. These vision systems are being used, for example, in self-driving cars. And if those cars cannot recognize certain segments of our population, that represents a huge, huge risk, right? Speech recognition systems identify words that are spoken by white users at a much higher rate than words spoken by Black users. In the healthcare setting, an algorithm used by US hospitals was found to be less likely to refer Black people than white people who were equally sick to programs that aim to improve care for patients with complex medical needs. And if you look at the healthcare outcomes of racial and ethnic minorities, as well as women, these groups are subject to less accurate diagnoses, curtailed treatment options, less pain management, and ultimately they have much worse clinical outcomes because of these biases that exist. There was a recent report in the New York Times that really focused on this issue about robots and artificial intelligence and how developers are really are committing to kind of end some of the bias that exists in how their technology is being developed and utilized. And again, much of this is because these algorithms that have been developed, they've been shown to be biased against people of color and others because the group that is developing these systems are white and male, affluent and able-bodied. And so when they aren't at the table and when you're not testing a vision recognition system with people from diverse backgrounds, you end up with these inherent biases that come from the technology. So these are direct examples of kind of where robotics can benefit, I think, from this increased emphasis on diversity, equity, and inclusion. I want to also kind of just remind all of us that this is a huge priority for FIRST. So they've identified initiatives, there are grants, there are resources. And when they really talk about underrepresentation, they're also talking about underserved populations as well as vulnerable youth. So, you know, the mission of FIRST is really to transform culture and to really engage and have everyone who wants to be part of our community to benefit from everything that FIRST has to offer. So it's a very broad kind of comprehensive perspective of diversity and what it brings to the table here. So kind of be aware of that as well. Then thinking about other things to consider, you know, in the last presentation, actually, we had a lot of discussion about core values and about mission and those kinds of things. And again, that can be linked to sort of diversity, equity, and inclusion. Is it important in helping you to fulfill your team's mission? And in many cases, it probably is. And maybe in most cases, it probably is. Is your team representative of your community? And you can define your community in any ways that you would like, whether that's your high school or your school that you're a part of, your broader local town or community, or maybe perhaps the broader FIRST community in general, right? Those are all important questions to ask. How do you actually recruit new members to your team? And are there actually potentially maybe biases in the way that you do that? So for example, word of mouth is often a very common approach, I think, that teams use to recruit. But if your team is got a social circle that maybe is similar to the social circle that we have identified in this exercise, then perhaps you're missing the opportunity to kind of engage with people and potential new team members outside of that social circle. And what about other aspects of diversity beyond gender and race and ethnicity? Again, FIRST is prioritizing support not only for underrepresented populations, but underserved and vulnerable populations as well. And then it's important to note that this year there have been some pretty significant changes in the Chairman's Award executive summary questions. And even if you are not a team that is intending to submit for Chairman's Award, the executive summary questions are really useful in sort of gauging where your team is at and where your team would like to go. And so a new executive summary question this year is, describe your team's efforts in the past 3 years to promote equity, diversity, and inclusion within your team first and your communities, right? So a very useful prompt for some reflection and some potential work. Now, in terms of resources, FIRST offers a really pretty extensive and helpful website for equity, diversity, and inclusion training and resources. So there are resources in there, there are training programs in there. If you have not taken advantage of these resources, I'd encourage you to kind of do that, because it's a great place to start, and really is very, very helpful. This is not something that you need to work on your own. There are other resources as well. So our FIRST in the Upper Midwest, we do have a diversity and inclusion committee. I'll talk about in a few slides one of the new initiatives that we have. We're working on collecting resources and collecting data. We have access to the demographic data from FRC, and if you are interested in learning more about that or getting some of that data that maybe is drilled down, for example, to the county level, we can provide that to you. We can also provide you with links to the resources for demographic data, for example, from the state of Minnesota, and students as well. Finally, we're always looking for new team members, or new committee members. So if you are interested in this topic and really would like to participate in this work, we welcome your participation. There are lots of FRC teams that you can turn to as well that are working on this issue and can be of support. And then there's the other support organizations that I hope you're aware of, groups like First Ladies, LGBTQ+ of FIRST. These are all kind of grassroots organizations that work on supporting specific populations of students and mentors as they engage with the work in robotics. And then finally, in terms of the issue about equity and inclusion, we really can't benefit from diversity if our community is not welcoming, inclusive, and equitable. And this is true not only in the context of your team and the way in which your team operates, but it's also true in the context of our events and kind of the way that our events are run. And this past summer, there was an Instagram account set up called Dear First Robotics, where underrepresented participants in FIRST Robotics submitted anonymous comments of their experiences in the program. And it fortunately was pretty sobering, because there were multiple examples of harassment, bias, discrimination reported by participants in our program. And if you haven't had a chance to look at this, I think it's important to recognize that not everyone in our community is feeling welcomed and feeling included. So that's important as well. So again, there are training resources within the FIRST Equity, Diversity, and Inclusion website for both team members to complete, as well as for mentors and coaches to complete. They are very, very helpful, and I'd encourage your team to take advantage of them. I think it's very important to be intentional about considering diversity, equity, and inclusion in all of your team activities, right? As from recruitment of students to retention of students and mentors and overall student success. These can be very difficult kind of conversations to have. And so, but it's important to really talk about and address any potential barriers to equity on your team, whether that involves issues of implicit or unconscious bias, discrimination, microaggressions, out and out abuse, the impact of institutional structures that promote inequality, systemic racism. Those are all things that are worth considering and worth talking about. And then finally, it's important to model expected behavior and to call out poor behavior. And then finally, this week, FIRST in the Upper Midwest announced a new grant program. This is being called the FIFO FUM grant, the FIRST Equity and Inclusion Financing Initiative for FIRST in the Upper Midwest. This is an opportunity for teams to apply for some funding to implement a new and creative project. And we're really hoping that teams will be creative about proposing ideas in which they can make changes to culture and increase the participation and success of underserved, underrepresented, and or vulnerable populations in FIRST Robotics in Minnesota, North and South Dakota. We provided some examples, but I don't want you to be limited by these examples. So don't think that these are the only things that would get funded. But for example, like Girls' Night in the Shop, or development of materials in different languages, maybe speaker costs for a team event. Those kinds are things that I think would be appropriate within the scope of the budget for these grants. But we're hoping that you will be creative and think about other ways in which you can work on this. The grants are anywhere from $100 to $1,000. We would ask that you spend it by the end of October of 2021. And there's a very, very short application that's at this site here, the FUM DEI grant. And the application deadline is January 26th of 2021. So we hope that you will take advantage of this and use this as an opportunity to experiment and to try and to pilot and try some new and different things. So I'm going to stop there. This is my contact information. If you have questions about the grant, you're welcome to contact me. And then, Megan, I think we'll kind of open it up for discussion at this point. Okay.
Yeah, and I do have a few question prompts if we need them, but I think it's good first and foremost just to open it up and see if anyone has any comments or insights or questions about what Yoji and I shared today. All right, and I will put these up here too. Oops, go there. And I'm very, sorry, close your eyes for a second. Oh, PowerPoint is being fussy. There we go. All right, so these are some of the questions too that came to my mind, and we are not limited to these, but these are some of the things that I'm curious about, both from a mentor perspective and a team member perspective, but a few things, and I'm curious if anybody would want to jump in and share a response to these. So a few of the questions I have: what are the opportunities in your teams? What kind of opportunities do you see that can help increase and or incorporate inclusion and diversity and equity? What opportunities came to mind related as you were listening to this presentation? As a mentor, how can you support inclusion and diversity in your team? And as a student, how can you do the same? And with being so virtual this year, what ideas do you have for being more inclusive? We'd love to have someone unmute themselves, share their thoughts, or use the chat.
Well, I'll start. I'm Chris from CIS 4607, and we live in a rural area where our area is not very diverse, to be honest. So we do pull from the school as best as we can, and we reach out to homeschooled as well, and especially if we have any foreign exchange students, that always is a nice addition. But I think one of the biggest changes for us was, I can speak personally, joining the team and being in the shop and being a woman just there. I think it made it more comfortable for other female students to be involved and to be there. And our participation with females has gotten over 50%. Wow. So I think, and that's in the shop and not in all of the areas. In fact, when we had our last Jumpstart, we had all females representing our team for the different speakers. So I don't know if we're kind of handicapped on some of the representation, but I think that just getting female mentors is a big thing that we can do.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely, I love that. Anyone else want to jump in? And Rachel, it looks like Rachel shared. Thank you, Rachel. And she says, I would echo that as well as Chris. I also work in our middle school robotics program. Being able to get the interest of girls at a younger age has helped with retention in high school. That makes a lot of sense. We've been talking about that at Medtronic too. We've been focusing a lot on high school seniors and undergraduate students, but really starting to think about STEM and how can we even help sponsor some programs even earlier. That seems to be really effective with that retention.
That has definitely helped with us having our our robotics team members going into the younger schools.
Good.
We have a lot of teams in Minnesota, like 4607, that have done a really great job at engaging girls and young women in the program. And there are great lessons to be learned. And it's not just, and it's throughout the state, actually. I think actually some of our teams outside of the Twin Cities area are doing a better job at this than our Twin Cities teams are. So just looking at the demographic data that we have from FIRST. So it's interesting. There's lots of great lessons to be learned.
Yeah. Anybody else?
Any ideas for virtual? I have none.
I just put that in there, Chris, because I was really curious about it too. So I'm glad you shared that. I am curious from students too, if there's things that and team members, what you guys have done. I would love to hear your ideas. And there is a question. Great questions. Thank you, Noel. Is there a specific reason why students of color, not Asians, are not represented proportionately in FIRST? And Yoji, I'll pass that to you if you have insight into that.
I wish we had an answer for that. You know, it's some of it I think comes down to kind of what Chris has mentioned about women. You know, seeing mentors who are women in the shop, working with the team in all aspects of the team. You know, and oftentimes you can't. If you don't see those role models, it's very, very difficult to kind of imagine yourself as a place in that room. So I think that's one of the issues. And I think the non-Asian people of color are also dramatically underrepresented in our mentor population. So so I think that's probably a good part of it. I'm also a little concerned about our events. I think we've heard sort of anecdotally our events. If you look at our events, if you look at the makeup of our teams at the events, you don't see a lot of people of color. And so when you're in the audience and you're kind of seeing that, and you are from those communities, I think you do wonder kind of, do I belong here? And that's really, really challenging. So so we have to really be much more intentional about that. One thing that I, you know, in my position in FIRST as a volunteer and kind of being on the field a lot, the most visible people that you see on the field are the drive team members. And the drive team members in general are mostly boys, and they're mostly white boys. And so when you see that on the field, I think that creates a message sometimes that it's not as inclusive maybe as we'd like it to be. So those are really, really challenging issues, and how to do that outreach is really important, to be intentional about that. Yeah.
And Noel asked a really good question too. Are there any sorts of DEI trainings for mentor students, et cetera, required by FIRST? Does the organization have frameworks for addressing their issues?
So as far as I'm aware, there's no requirement for training in DEI. The resources are available on that website to complete the training, but I don't believe that it's required currently. So I think that's a good first place to start, and then to begin that discussion within your team about how to, if this is a passion for you that you want to address, that's a really good place to start. Sorry, so it's not required, but strongly recommended.
So hi, this is Susan Lawrence. Anyone who is an employee of FIRST is required to go through the training. So, and we're required to go through it annually, so that everyone is covered and we're continually reminded of it. There are several segments that we need to go through. I'm not even sure they're all on the website. They may be independent of it. but they're very, First is very serious about this. It's we are constantly reminded as we Laura Shimizu, who is our volunteer coordinator, hears about it, looking for folks to be better represented in the judging group and the volunteer group. So we're working at it, but it's slow.
Well, I guess the other thing I would encourage you to do is maybe think creatively about, could the grant mechanism be helpful here for your own team in terms of, is there something that we could, that you could use those dollars for to address those issues? And there was something in the chat about a STEM night in collaboration with the local Girl Scouts. That's a great idea as well. And again, think about the grant mechanism. You know.
And it's not only the FUM grants, there are grants available from FIRST for all teams to creatively approach the underserved. And they're looking at continuously what's working in one place. We have had money in the past in both St. Paul and in very large grants in St. Paul and in Minneapolis. And at 2,500 used to do workshops for us at competitions to discuss it. And it doesn't come easily. We have to be, to Yoji's terms, very purposeful in being, in seeking and being very accepting. And I think one of the good things about the training that is available is you can very innocently do something and not even realize that you've been offensive, that you've appeared to be threatening, show a lack of understanding. You really need to listen and observe and be very mindful that how you're behaving may be coming out of your own heritage, and not be mindful of the heritage of others.
Great point. Thank you. And I think our session ends at 11:25. And I think, Yoji, I don't have it up in front of me, but I think that's right. Is that?
I think that's correct.
All right. So it looks like we are right on time. So with that, thank you, Yoji, for co-presenting with me today. I hope that this was really insightful. I hope that you'll start to be thinking about this even more and incorporating them amongst your teams. As Yoji said, please reach out if you have questions. And we'll get started in about 8 minutes. So take a little break, a little mental break, grab a cup of coffee or some water, and we'll see you soon.